Hi, I'm Dennis Rainey, and I want to welcome you to a new episode of Inspiring Courageous Faith. And I want to introduce the person in just a moment, and I want to do it in a very unusual way. Dr. Howard Hendricks was my favorite professor at Dallas Theological Seminary. So much so that when he died, I flew down to Dallas and went to his memorial service at a huge church. 3,000 people came for a 3.5-hour memorial. And that wasn't enough time. But I have a collection that I have of memorials and what's said about the person who died and what they were known for. And in his case, he was a pithy communicator, Dr. Howard Hendricks. And I just want to share with you some of the things he said. Fear not that your life shall come to an end. Fear that it will have no beginning. Another one, my fear is not that you will succeed, but that you will succeed in doing the wrong thing. And then I think one more here. He said, your career is what you are paid to do. Your calling is what you are made to do. He said this, I love to teach, I live to teach. Prof was an incredible teacher for 60 years and influenced and mentored generations of seminary students over that time period. And they went on to influence people around the world. And he had over 13,000 students in his classes. And I had the privilege of being one of those young men to take every class he taught in 1 year. He taught 5 classes. I took all of them. And he didn't believe in tests. He believed in homework. And he nearly killed me because he didn't ask you to just go read and check the box. He asked you to percolate and to get into the content. Now, when you think about what he did, that's a lot of classes to take from one guy. But Howard Hendricks was always on the edge. He had the message. His wife authenticated that message. And he knew how to challenge and motivate men and women down to their core. In fact, I probably set a record for the most number of laymen who were brought to his class when I was a student. I'd bring him in from all over Dallas and Fort Worth. And he actually came to me one time and he said, Rainey, where you get these guys? Sitting under Howard Hendricks' teaching was like drinking water from a fire hydrant. He was alive. He knew who Jesus Christ was. He had impacted his life. And so what I want to do is this is a podcast on inspiring your faith, your courageous faith. And I just want you to get a taste of how he would motivate people. And what you're going to hear today is a message that Prof gave on aging and retirement. And he definitely had some convictions on that subject. This is from a series of messages that he gave to the Family Life Weekend to Remember speaker team. Now, let me just stop and tell you who that was. We have a speaker team that puts on our marriage conferences all over the country. And we had about 55, 60 couples who were on that team. And Prof could do a lot of things with his time. But over the past decade of his life, he came and invested in us as next generation emissaries who were carrying the message to marriages and families who came to our conference. And so today, as I talk about aging, I don't think most of us have a very good perspective about it, and certainly not about retirement. And some of the issues we're going to face as we grow older. Dr. Hendricks says, as followers of Christ, we ought to have a different view as we grow older. I totally agree. So let's roll up our sleeves and wait to have your heart and your brain, as he would say, dusted with itching powder.
I want to talk on rethinking retirement, one of the greatest transitions in human experience. Norman Cousins said it, retirement, supposed to be a chance to join the winner's circle, has turned out more dangerous than automobiles and LSD. It is the chance to do everything that leads to nothing. It is the gleaming brass ring that unhorses the rider. For many people, retirement is an assignment to no man's land, grossly ill-fitted for Christian culture. We are producing, men and women, a society of unemployed people without a mission, the equivalent of a death sentence. It is proven by statistics. We now know that the average person dies within 7 years after retirement. And increasingly, that figure is being changed because it is not uncommon for people to die 2 years after retirement. And the reason is clear. There are 2 lines in every person's life. There is a lifeline and there is a purpose line. And the moment the purpose line evaporates, it is just a question of time before the lifeline goes as well. Bear in mind that retirement is a recent social phenomenon. The arbitrary age of 65 was set in 1889 by German Chancellor Bismarck. But what has always fascinated me is at that time in history, the life expectancy was 55. So the bulk of the people for whom it was designed never enjoyed the benefits. And increasing it, as the United States has done, is just as ridiculous. Every now and then I hear someone say retirement is not a biblical concept, and it's quite transparent to anyone who knows the scriptures that it is not the pattern for a born-again, eternally headed individual. But it's only partially true. We do have one reference to retirement in the scripture, and it's found in Numbers 8, verses 25 and 26, where we are informed that the Levites were to retire at age 50. Reason being, the task was so arduous, so strenuous, that men in the intelligence which God alone provided said you need to give up the physical ministry of the priesthood. But what is often overlooked is that he gave them an option. He said, I want you to spend the rest of your life mentoring younger priests. Now, you may retire from a job. You may not have the option, but you never retire from life. You never retire from a ministry. Stepping into retirement is stepping into an entirely different universe with a distinctive lifestyle all of its own. And I am convinced that this particular transition is to the believer one of the highest measurements of your spiritual maturity. So today I want to move into two areas. First of all, examine retirement negatively, what it is not, and then positively, what it is. Let's begin with the power of negative thinking, with apologies to Norman Vincent Peale. I find Peale appalling and Paul appealing. The more I am exposed to the Christian community, the more I am convinced that some of the sloppiest thinking in all of time totally infects Christians who move into retirement. So let me give you 7 things retirement is not. First of all, it is not a reward. Your reward comes in heaven, not on earth. But so many people think it's a reward for good behavior. And the result is they spend their years sliding for home, reaching for the bench at the very time they ought to be tearing the place apart for Jesus Christ. Secondly, it's not a formula. There is no one-size-fits-all retirement available. It's a process, but it's a process that is highly individual. There is no contract that spells out the details and the conditions. There's no blueprint showing you the way. Third, retirement is not a retreat. As a matter of fact, it is exactly the opposite. It is intentional advance. But the key is that it involves a gradual adjustment. Number 4, it is not busy work. Something to give you something to do. It's a balance between leisure and work. Isn't it amazing how often we suffer from the peril of the pendulum? We swing to one side or the other. Throughout our life, we constantly face the danger of worshiping work as an idol. But now we worship leisure as an idol. And is it any wonder that John finishes an epistle by saying, keep yourself from idols. Number 5, it is not self-centered. It's not socially pigging out, getting lost in an entertainment glut. Retirement is meant to be more than for my benefit. And I think that's why an increasing number, even of secular people, are retiring from retirement. The one positive thing about the baby boom is they've lived long enough and watched enough older people waste the latter years of their life that they are refusing to go that route. They are asking for more time for employment, for at least it gives them something worthwhile to do. 6, retirement is not guaranteed. There is no guarantee that those latter years of your life will be successful. They are the bonus years. But they all depend upon 2 things: God's part and your part. No question that God will come through with his part. The question is, will you and I come through with our part? And ultimately, that depends on how well prepared you are. And 7th and last, Retirement is not death. We got 100% probability on that. Retirement has 4 major problems attached to it. The first of which is income, the financial component. The second of which is health, the physical component. The third of which is housing, your living arrangements. But the fourth and the most important is purpose, meaning, and interest in life. And the fascinating thing to me, and all of the research proves it, is we're making tremendous progress in the first 3, but substantially none in the 4th. Because it's the least recognized and it's the most neglected. And I'd like to share with you 5 principles, but I want to underscore for you every one of them has a danger inherent in it. Number 1, retirement requires intensive prayer and planning and preparation. It is hard to come up with the statistics, but if you talk to people who are specialists in the field of geriatrics, they will tell you this is virtually non-existent. And I would say, well, maybe that's just true of the pagan community and culture. I could only wish it were true. I spend all of my time in the Christian community, and I'm here to tell you the preparation is in the algebraic minus quantity. Here's a passage of scripture that I hear, in my judgment, perverted. It's found in the book of James, chapter 4. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow, we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. Why, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? Here's the key. Your life is a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. He's got a little slice of life in which to make your impact for Christ. And often this is said to be a prohibition against planning. Nothing further from the biblical truth. Look at the last part. Instead, here's your option. You ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast and brag, and all such boasting is evil. Anyone then who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it sins. What an indictment. Not of lack of planning, but of planning with presumption that I'm going to do this or that in my retirement. And that is guaranteed. And no thought of the will of God. That's why I say you need to begin by discarding the secular concept of retirement that prevails in your culture. And you need to replace it with the understanding it's not what do I want for my retirement, what does the Lord of my life want for my retirement? How does He want me to spend those bonus years which are priceless? And planning, I am discovering, is a form of spiritual discipline. Most of us don't plan to fail. We fail to plan. And that's particularly true in the area of retirement. What's the danger in this? The danger is the danger of unrealistic expectations. They're either false, or they're shifting, or they do not exist. And in any case, they are lethal. The second principle I would share with you is this. Retirement is always built on your personal mission, your calling. And that's why it's not more productive. To be productive and rewarding, your retirement must be meaningful to you in your stage of life. That's why you constantly need to ask the question I hope you have asked prior to this. Why did God place me on the planet? I told you I am a fulfilled human being because thank God for mentors who so built into my life that they helped me to determine early on what was my passion, what was my gift. And if I do not teach, then I cease having any reason for existence. And so people constantly ask me, what are you going to do when you retire? I say, you got to be kidding. I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing right now and have been for over 51 years at the seminary and prior to that in a pastorate. And that's building into the life of other people. But what happens if I become incapacitated? I can no longer travel, no longer move, no longer speak. Then I will spend those remaining years praying for those like you that God has left on the planet to fulfill the mission He has given you. What's the danger in the second principle? It's the danger of allowing your life to turn inward, to become self-absorbed and provincial. And I must tell you, nothing breaks my heart as much as to sit as I did not too long ago with a man who could not control his crying by telling me I wasted my life, when everybody in our community celebrates him as the ultimately successful. And now he spends all of his time with his press clippings, all of his time looking at those awards that he received. But he has no external impact except that which is negative. Number 3, retirement revolves around your self-identity. And remember, your self-identity is being continually formed through the whole of your life. And by the way, if you have not learned that you are not indispensable, retirement will teach you that as nothing else. Like a businessman said to me recently, he said, Hendricks, I woke up one day after the party, after the celebration, and in the first month I discovered no one ever called me. I spent all of my time and my life on the phone giving counsel, recommending what others ought to do, and nobody. And so I decided I'd go down to the office to see. And I said, how's it going? It is going fantastic. It's never been this good. And he said, I climbed into my car and I couldn't drive because I couldn't see. And suddenly it dawned on me, I'm not indispensable. I never have been. We need to learn to distinguish between our work and our worth. What you are as a person is not to be equated with what you do. My friend, you are not a human doing, you are a human being. And our worth ultimately as Christian is what we are in Christ. The danger is that that image is distorted by other people. And so you depend on what you need, and that's strokes. But if that's your only dependence, you're in trouble. The fourth one, retirement involves a definite process. And it can easily be summarized in 3 words. There is a losing, there is a leaving, and there is a letting go. If you fail to do any of the 3, you're in deep trouble. See, loss is important to all of life. A number of us were talking before, many of them my students here, and they said, Prof, what have you lost? I said, how many hours have you have? Gina and I lost our oldest daughter. You expect to bury your parents. You don't expect to bury your children. Try that. We lost my youngest son's wife from breast cancer after 7 years of incredible agony, leaving 3 wonderful kids without a mom. And in the process of discussion, I said, you guys need to know, I have not lost anything of my drive, of my passion, but I've lost some of my energy. I no longer can do what I used to do. Try adjusting to that. And it's hard for some of you because you're not there yet. Though some of you are moving in that direction and are beginning to see there are losses to life. And your task is to leave them, to let them go. Otherwise, you cling tenaciously to them, and that's what eats your lunch in retirement. That's why older people spend so much time in nostalgia. It's not simply a desire to return to the past. It's a failure to face the future. The danger in retirement is inertia. It's passivity. It's people who just sit. And if they think at all they can think of is their past. Number 5. Retirement demands an eternal perspective. It was my little brother at Wheaton, Jim Elliott, who used to say it so often when we would meet. Howie, we must give what we cannot keep in order to gain what we cannot lose. So as a Christian, you are forced to give up in order to gain what I believe may be the most significant years of your life from God's perspective. But the ultimate question in an eternal perspective is, what is the center of your life around which everything else is organized? Is it a terminating core? Or is it a non-terminating core? Ever you build your life around a terminating core, whether it's your home or your car or your money or even your family, then you are going to sustain the most severe losses. And it will never fulfill you. And that's why the only adequate candidate, in my judgment, is Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. This is why I believe hope is unique to Christianity. C.S. Lewis said it, hope means a continual looking forward to the eternal world. It does not mean that we are to leave the present world as it is. If you read history, you will find that the Christians who did most for the present world were just those who thought most of the next world. It is since Christians have largely ceased to think of the other world that they have become so ineffective in this one. Aim at heaven, and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth, and you will get neither. When I was a kid, I cannot tell you how many times I heard the statement from pastors and Bible teachers and friends. And that is, you spend so much time thinking about the next world that you are no good in this one. You know what we need to do? We need to reverse that. We spend so much time in this world that perhaps this is why we're no more effective in terms of the next one. What's the danger? The danger is forgetting where your home is. Malcolm Muggeridge, in his penetrating way, said, the only ultimate disaster that can befall us as Christians is to feel ourselves to be at home here on earth. As long as we are aliens, we cannot forget our true homeland.
You know, what Dr. Hendricks is doing is he's challenging us to think about our retirement, not in a worldly way, but to think about it from a spiritual standpoint, in a biblical way, to be on assignment. It's so easy to go through your career and think that retirement it is at the finish line. And when we cross it, we get to do whatever we want. Well, I just want you to know that's not the case. I'm not retired. Barbara's not retired. And Barbara and I are planning to use the time we have left to impact as many people as we can, take as many people to heaven with us as possible. But I also know that God's purposes for our lives don't end at retirement. We need to have a realigned purpose of our lives in light of the mission God has called us to. And we need to get on with life, not kick it into neutral and coast to the finish line. We need to be about God's work in and through us all the way to the end as we live on this planet. You know, it takes some courage in our culture today to determine what God might want you to do with that extra time that you have in retirement. Retirement demands an eternal perspective. It's about investing in people. It's about seeing God continue to use us in His work on planet Earth. And He's not done using us until we take our last breath. That's why Barbara and I like to say we're not retired. We are refired, we've re-upped, and we've re-engaged with a desire to serve God and influence people all the way to the finish line. as long as we can. And I have one of the best examples in Howard Hendricks, who continued to speak and mentor me well into his 80s. What a remarkable man. Howard Hendricks was, he was such an encouragement. But one of my favorite stories to tell about him was when I was serving on the board of Dallas Seminary. And I would arrive the day before the board meeting, and I would take Prof and Jean, his wife, out to eat. And we'd usually spend a good bit of the evening together talking, chatting about what was going on. And he seemed a little under the weather. And I said, "Hey, Prof, you going to come tomorrow when I speak at the commencement?" I'd been asked to speak at the graduation commencement for Dallas Seminary. And he said, I've been to a few of these over my 60 years of teaching. I think I'm going to pass. And I said, "Boy, I understand. Thanks." Well, when I arrived to put on my cap and gown to take the podium, I looked over my shoulder at the parking lot, and guess who was walking all the way through the parking lot? Prof and his wife, Jean. It was incredibly humbling to think that he, although he was ill, wanted to be there to encourage just one of his students. He was a mentor, he was a friend, and he was a partner in ministry. What a great man. As he would say, may his tribe increase now in these days. We need a bunch of profs in our midst. Thanks for watching Inspiring Courageous Faith, and I don't know what your action point is out of this, but I just want you to pause and think about what he taught, what you've caught from this. How are you going to apply this to your life, your marriage, your family, and the rest of the days God's given you? Don't drop the baton. Keep running all the way to the finish line. I'm Dennis Rainey, and that's an edition of Inspiring Courageous Faith. Come back again and watch us next week.
Go to therainey's.org/podcast for more Inspiring Courageous Faith content.